Have you ever wondered what it is like to work in a call center, especially in the tech field? If so, stick around as I tell you just how crazy and weird a call center can be.
This is Media Channels, a multimedia corp production, bringing you information about the latest media trends, helpful tutorials, and commentary on the digital world around you.
Welcome everyone, my name is Stuart Rathtree, hosting episode number 19 of the Media Channels podcast on the 26th of January 2019. Today's episode will cover the various tech-related call centers that I worked in, the good and bad aspects of working in such a place, how customers would treat me, and some of the more crazy situations that I found myself in. When I look back at my days at working in various call centers, I can only laugh now at the various situations I ended myself being in. It wasn't all fun and games, however. Till about a year after that I had finally finished working in call centers, I would actually experience nightmares about having to go back to work. And I bet you a lot of other call center workers feel the same way, that they didn't really want to go into work, but they had to. So after a year, this had been going on. I had nightmares, and then they finally went away. And that's the kind of thing that call centers would do to you. It would drive you crazy in a lot of ways. When I did work there, or one of the various call centers, going into work was a daily chore for me. I would go in knowing that today someone was going to probably scream at me, probably insult me. Management would probably get on my case for some reason about phone stats. I could be written up for a bad call or otherwise scrutinized. You're basically being hit on from all sides, and it just wasn't a very fun experience for the most part. Not to say that there wasn't some good experiences, but there was a lot of bad experiences. Let's be honest though, everyone knows that call centers are not for the faint of heart. It takes a certain kind of mentality and thick skin to be able to take the abuse that is typically piled onto you on a daily basis. Over roughly the 3 to 4 years of my experience in actual call centers, a lot of people that were applying for the positions didn't actually make it out of training, and I saw this quite a bit. Never mind, they didn't make it to the call floor. So even if they did pass training and made it to the call floor, which is where everyone was in their cubicles, many people didn't also last even a month in the call center. It just wasn't for them. You need to be have a special kind of patience to be able to deal with people on the phone on a daily basis. I was fortunate enough, if you can call it that I only had to do inbound and not outbound sales call. And I know that outbound sales calls can be even worse than inbound, but I refused to do outbound, so I stuck with the inbound stuff. My first job was actually at a IBM call center back in the early 2000s. I was doing tech support, and I managed to last in that job for about 7 months. That was at an IBM call center. Tech at the time was my passion, and I suppose it still is today. And after doing that job, it managed to kill a little bit a part of me. For me, working in a call center, it was like being in an abusive relationship. You know you need to run far, far away, but something keeps calling you back, okay? And I don't mean to introduce puns into it, calling you back, But anyways, it was not even a year later that I found myself back at a call center again. This time is because I really needed employment, and you know what? This was an easy way to get employment, to work at a call center. I had experience already. How hard can it possibly be? This time it wasn't a tech job, but I ended up at a outfit working for ShopNBC, a shopping channel for NBC at the time. And I was doing customer support end support for product purchases. So customers would call in saying they had a problem with their product or they had a billing issue and we'd have to take care of it. I lasted there a while. I didn't actually quit that job, but they ended up closing the center down because they wanted to move their operations over to greener, cheaper foreign pastures. Okay, so we all know how that goes. My final call center experience was with Verizon, the DSL side of it, doing tech support from about 2004 to mid-2005, end of 2005. Actually, probably even to 2006, now that I think about it. That was actually one of my better experiences with call centers, as I was actually hired as a level 3 support person rather than the standard level 2. So level 2 in this call center was basically someone who took the frontline calls, and level 3 started out for me being helping other agents with their technical problems and approving tickets, support tickets, so they could send out a technician to fix the issue. For the most part, my association with customers was kept to a minimal, and I mainly helped other agents. And again, I approved what they were called MCO tickets. No one would know what that means unless you worked for Verizon. This changed, however, about a year in, as I was moved to ticket management, which meant that I was to go through open support tickets to make sure that they were done correctly, to make sure that a tech went out to the client's business, and then we'd have to follow up with the customer and ensure proper resolution. That role in the call center, it felt a little bit like Russian roulette. The reason I say that is because most of the agents didn't want to be that one person who called the customer back to find out if the resolution or the fix worked, and then get a customer who has been through the ringer, has been through multiple agents and never had a resolution and was extremely upset. So it was kind of a dread that we had. So we would call, and there's always going to be one person on our team who got that one call like that. So we would go back and forth like that. We were like, oh, today I hope it's not us. I hope it's not us. I hope it's not us. Part of that role as well was to try to make nice and clean up the mess that was made. So it was up to us to basically, fix anything that went wrong, fix anything that the agents did wrong, forward stuff to the proper departments if it was going through the wrong channels to get something fixed, and so on and so on and so on. One of the other mantras or sayings that we had on our team at the time was, I hope that we get voicemail. Because if we got voicemail, hey, then we don't have to worry about it anymore, right? If they call back, they'll just get a regular agent. The thing with call centers however, is that they are always losing propositions. They're not money makers. In the eyes of the company, they're not profitable, and they're just one of those things that they have to have so that they either don't get sued, so they don't have a bad public opinion, and that people actually have a way to resolve issues that they might be having, rather than have to go through a bunch of weird channels to get something fixed. Call centers during my time in the 2000s were always outsourced to the lowest bidder. So Canada at the time was the lowest bidder, without having to go to foreign countries with agents who barely spoke English. But as you know now, most call centers are outsourced to India or other similar countries who don't speak very good English. Or with a lot of companies like Google and Facebook and some of these tech companies now, they don't even have call centers that you can call into. You have to do it over chat, which is, I find, really, really irritating. But anyways, that's another topic for another time. I believe if these giant conglomerations ever truly cared about their customers and not necessarily just their stock prices, I think that they would do much better with their companies. I believe that they should host their call centers in-house, because then they have access and they have an intimate knowledge about the products and services that they offer. You know, it's easier to go walk down the hall and ask somebody a question about something than it is to try to call through 10 different departments to try and to find out an answer to your question. The first call that I received at the IBM call center was, for me, terrifying and exciting at the same time. But after the first few weeks, that feeling quickly fades, however, and is replaced with sort of a dread. It's a tension in your chest, sort of a thing. You just have this feeling throughout your whole body, like, I just don't want to be here. And it wasn't like that every day. You know, you had good days and you had bad days, obviously. But, you know, call centers, it just brought out sometimes the worst in people. And that's just the nature of the game, I suppose. Of course, I don't think I could ever work in a call center again. I'm basically, what I say is, completely damaged goods, just because I know too much of what goes on in call centers that I could never do anything properly anymore. You see, the thing with call centers is that you are bound by a strict set of rules and practices that you must follow. Okay, so these can include, probably in all call centers actually, is that you have to have a proper opening greeting that you can never deviate from. If you do, you can get docked on quality assurance or something nonsense like that, such as, thank you for calling so-and-so, my name is so-and-so, what is your name and phone number, etc., blah, 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 blah. But if I went back to a call center today and I was doing the opening greeting, I probably wouldn't care that much about it. I'd be like, hello, my name is Stuart. Please tell me quickly what it is broken with your system so I can fix it quickly and then I can go for lunch, you know, kind of a thing. Obviously, that is what we were all thinking while on calls, but for me now, I'd probably just say it without even thinking about it. Another mantra that was often used in call centers, and that's often frequently in training sessions, is the buzzword, you know, empathy, 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 but not sympathy, right? You don't want to be sympathetic to the customer, you want to be empathetic, you know. Basically, what you're saying is, I pretend to care, but I don't actually care. I'm just trying to get you through the queue, get you off the line so we can move on to the next call. If I tried that today, I'd probably be less empathetic and probably more, I probably might say something like this to a customer who might be having a bad day with their technology. Really? Your dog puked on your computer because you fed it human food and now it doesn't work? If I got a call like that, I probably would just not care and just hang up the phone at that point. I just feel like, oh, okay, whatever, click, end of call. Of course, I would get written up for some quality insurance, assuming they were monitoring the call at that time. Call centers, they also like to emphasize metrics over everything else. So each call is supposed to last this amount of minutes, it's supposed to use this amount of the customer's name, this amount of hold times, and when you're on hold, it has to be for this amount of minutes, no more than. And then you have to use calming statements as well when you're talking to the customer. I understand, I will put you on hold for exactly 1 minute, and then if you don't make it back in 1 minute, it's like, oh, you're going to get docked on quality assurance. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, right. And so on. It was a formula, obviously, and it's very robotic. I mean, towards the end of my call center days, I was a lot less robotic and more like just whatever goes kind of a thing, and I just try to work the system as best I can. But honestly, that's all they really care about is the metrics and the quality assurance. They're not necessarily there to fix the customer's issue, and that's one of the major problems I see with call centers today. And when you get into a mindset like that, then it comes out on the agents as well. So, well, if they don't care, why should I care? So they're just trying to get through the call just so they can make it the next call and the next call and the next call. If I worked in a call center today, I probably would tell what some companies would call business intelligence, which is their statistics department that monitors what everyone's doing at all times to make sure they're doing what they're doing. I would probably just tell them where to go. If they called me up and say, hey, you're taking too long in this call, I'd be like, yeah, so Click. And they'll probably just call me back again and again, and I'll just, I don't care. Whatever. You fire me then. Whatever. I don't care. I'd probably eat on the phone. You're not supposed to do that when you're a call center, obviously. I mean, customers would call up all the time. They're always drinking and eating into their headset or into their phone, and it drove pretty much anybody up the wall. Today, if I was working in a call center, I'd probably eat and drink and not even care. I mean, I'm thirsty. I'm gonna drink. I got a sore throat. I've been speaking all day. I'm gonna have a drink. Certain call centers I worked in, they'd allow water on the floor, which was a good thing. I don't think they allowed coffee, but water for sure, because you do get a dry throat and whatnot. I would also probably do a lot of lip smacking, just to, if I got one of those customers that I really didn't like, I'd probably start lip smacking just to annoy them a little more. I might also take 2 hours to solve a customer's issue because I just want to get it resolved, so then call back again 20 times. I had that mentality a little bit even when I was still working at Verizon, or IBM. I would take longer on the call just to make sure they don't call back a second time, even though it really screwed up their metrics. I really didn't care, because if they have to call back 3 or 4 times, I mean, when you think about it honestly, do you want somebody on the phone for 10 minutes with 4 agents taking up 40 minutes of time, or do you want 1 agent on the phone for 30 minutes and solve the issue? I don't know. Do the math, right? So it just doesn't make sense to me why they do it that way. But anyways, another thing that was always taught in training, is always taught to us, was always be courteous to customer, even if the customer's always right, even if they're being a total bleep wad to you. I hate you and your company. You are the worst agent ever. You smell. You're stupid. And then we'd be like, yes, Mr. Customer, I appreciate what you are saying. But today, if I did, I'd be like, no. You know what? I took a shower this morning. It's you that smells like rotten potatoes, and I can smell it from 2,000 miles away. Click, then hang up the phone. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm pretty damaged when it comes to call centers. You have to have a lot of patience with customers and even the management too. I mean, there's a lot of times where agents would get very angry with the management, get very angry with the customers, and a lot of times you're thinking, you might be thinking about the customer, you're a total noob at computers or whatever it is that you're dealing with, or technology. And basically that's what deep down most of us thought. I mean, why do you even own a computer in the first place if you don't know anything about it? Why do you own this, whatever it is, if you don't care about it, or you don't have any idea what it's for or how to use it? It's like they just ordered it because somebody else had it, and it's like, well, okay, now I'm going to be a tutorial for the next 2 hours to try to teach you how to use this piece of technology. I also had one customer, I remember from my IBM days. They had, this one's a particularly interesting and funny story. I mean, it wasn't funny for me at the time. It's funny for me afterwards, because in hindsight I realized just how ridiculous it was. But what happened is a customer called up, and they had an issue with their desktop not powering up. Okay, so back in 2001, IBM desktops were still a common thing, okay? So I ran them through the normal troubleshooting steps. Is there any lights on the computer? Okay, there isn't. Okay, can you check to make sure that's plugged in? So they go under their desk and they're checking around, fumbling around. They come back in a few minutes. Oh, yeah, it's plugged in. Okay, great. Can you unplug it and plug back? Okay, great. Okay, yeah. Still not turning on? It's okay. Okay, so it's plugged in. Can you check that the power bar is turned on? Oh, yeah, the power bar's turned on, definitely turned on, and I'm like, oh great, here we go. This is gonna be a long call. I'm gonna have to go help the customer take the computer apart, reseat the connections, make sure that the power supply is plugged in, and all this yada yada. It's gonna be a long call. They probably don't know anything about it. A lot of customers would fight us like, well, why do I have to do this? Shouldn't you guys just shouldn't you guys just send somebody over to do this for me? And I'm like, well, no, this is our standard practice. You know, we got to run you through these troubleshooting steps first. And that's what all call centers are like. And so at this point, I was like very desperate. I didn't want to continue this call any longer. So in the last ditch effort, before having to run the customer through the other troubleshooting steps, was to get a lamp, plug it into the power bar, and see if the lamp was working. I'm like, you know what? Maybe the power bar is messed up somehow. Who knows what's going on here? So let's plug a lamp into it and see if the lamp works. And then the customer's like, well, yeah, actually, there's a lamp already plugged into the power bar, but you know what? It's not going to work because the power's out in the building. Let's just say you didn't want to know what I was thinking at that point. If I told the customer what I was thinking at that point, I definitely would have been fired. And you might be thinking that I was being trolled, but they were dead serious in their questioning and reasoning and their rationale. These people were not computer illiterate at all. And I can tell you with 100% certainty they were not trolling me. Their reasoning for why the computer... Now, I asked them, well, if there's no power, how is your computer going to work? So their rationale for why the computer should still work during a power outage is because they thought there was a large battery inside the case and that it would just keep everything running, including the monitor and everything else, right? And then they proceeded to complain why IBM didn't sell desktops with a battery inside it. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like, come on, seriously? I think it was that call that effectively was one of the straws that broke the camel's back, so to speak. I was just, at that point, I was just like, can it get any more ridiculous than this? And I also seem to remember a similar customer in a similar situation asking me why the power on their desktop wasn't wireless. And now you have to keep in mind that Tesla, you know, the whole thing was wireless power. There was nowhere on the horizon. This is back in 2001, okay? So there was no wireless power on the horizon. There was no wireless charging or anything like that. You know, Tesla's ideas were far out of people's minds at the time. Okay, yeah, okay, maybe wireless charging is possible, but you know what? We're here. You bought a $1,000 computer and you want it to be powered wirelessly. And I'm just thinking to myself, well, did you receive a device with your computer that you could have it powered wirelessly? How would it connect to the mains or your outlets? You know, like, why ask me that question? I just don't understand. Like, some of the questions we got at the call centers are just mind blowing. It's just, I mean, there's so many stories. I don't remember half them now, but it was just ridiculous. But they were funny too. You know, after the call, you're trying not to laugh during the call, and you're just thinking to yourself, okay, I just want to get up this call so I can just tell one of the other agents what this call was about. But if you've never seen, there's a show called the IT Crowd. It's basically, it's actually help desk. It's not call center support. But if you never watched IT Crowd, do yourself a favor and go watch it. It's truly hilarious if you want to get a good laugh. And it runs along the same parallels as what I would necessarily would happen in a call center. Another call center POFA, as I like to say, is that you are never supposed to hang up on the customer. And believe it or not, we had some very creative ways of hanging up on the customer when we knew that the call wasn't going to go anywhere or it wasn't being productive. For instance, we would use the mute button. Okay, we would just click the mute button on and off randomly, you know, maybe for a few seconds, in the hopes that the customer would think the line is dead or otherwise unstable, and then it would just hang up on us. Okay, and just as a disclaimer, if you work in a call center, please don't do these. I mean, if you get caught, you'll probably get fired or you get written up or something like that. If you value your job. If you don't value your job, then hey, go nuts. We'll see. We might have some fun with it. Accidentally, another thing we used to do is we'd accidentally knock out the headset of the phone. Like our phones had headsets. Kind of like what I'm wearing now, but with a microphone attached to, like a gaming headset type of thing, but commercial style. We'd accidentally unplug it from the extension. Be like, oh, geez, I don't know what happened there. Oh, geez, I guess we got disconnected somehow. Oops. I guess the customer's going to have to hang up now. Another thing we used to do, or other agents would do, is, oh, yeah, and I still hear this today when I call into other call centers. I hear this when people doing this to me. Oh yes, Mr. Customer, my computer is frozen or slow. It is going to take about 10 to 15 minutes before it starts working again. Please feel free to call back later. And my computer should be up and running by then. And there was a little bit of truth to this. Sometimes we had machines that were or just horribly slow, or they would crash in the middle of a call, and then you're like, I just lost all the customer information. I can't pull up anything. And you're like, oh, okay. So there were situations where that actually does happen, but we were a little bit like, oh, we got to get this customer off the phone. It's just, my computer's not really crashing, but yeah, you know what? It's really slow right now. There's some database issues going on. You better just call back later and, get another agent. By that time, you've already gone on break, so it's not your problem anymore. I mean, that's kind of a bit of a thing you did to other agents. It's not something you should be doing. The other agents would get kind of ticked off at you. Some other ways we would get the customer to hang up intentionally was to irritate the customer intentionally by being intentionally slow, making mistakes. Oh, geez, I didn't mean to. Oh, you know what? I just sent you to the wrong place. Oh, sorry, I just made a huge mistake. And just, oh, give me a minute. Give me a minute. Oh, I can solve this. I can fix this. Oh, my bad. That kind of thing. Kind of being intentionally incompetent in the hopes that they'll get frustrated and just hang up on you. Just bear with me. And then click. Customer hangs up. That was some of the weird things that we did to get customers off the phone. As well, there was always policies in place on a more serious note to ensure that customers were not allowed, speaking to supervisors when you call into call centers is always frowned upon. They really don't want to speak to the customers at all. It was always like last resort, kind of a thing. And at least one of the call centers I was in didn't want you to transfer you to a supervisor unless the customer specifically asked 3 times or more to be transferred to a supervisor. And if that happened, then yes, we had to transfer to a supervisor. Now, some of the other call centers aren't that at all. They'll just be like, if they ask like 30 times and they won't get off the phone, then transfer to us. But, otherwise don't transfer us. We're busy. And meanwhile, they're in the coffee room having a break and, just being kind of like, who knows what they're doing half the time. But anyways, I'm not going to bash supervisors necessarily, but, sometimes they weren't doing too much work. Yeah, I mean, you knew that, right? We'd also used to say, if we didn't want to transfer to a supervisor, we'd be like, oh, you know what? My supervisor is extremely busy. He's like... Oh, he's like on another call. He's been on that call for like 2 hours now. I wouldn't hold my breath. There's no other like supervisors on the floor right now. Oh, yeah. You know what? I'll just help. I'll just help you out. Don't worry about that kind of. My supervisor, he can't do anything I can't do. Just let me help you. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, right. We have the power to nuke They have the power to nuke the entire call center if they wanted to. They can give out free money, free credits, free service. They can put in high-level requests that we wouldn't normally be able to do. I'm just thinking to myself, yeah, right. Freaking just basically straight up lying to you. And that's the thing with call centers. They expect you to lie sometimes, and that's I don't necessarily agree with that. And that's probably another reason why I would fail entrance quizzes or interviews, or not even get a second interview if I applied at a call center again. As well, I'm going to say my time at IBM was also pretty interesting in a different way. I was this was my first call center, and I was level 1 support for IBM branded desktops for consumers. And as I had already mentioned, this was when IBM still had a desktop line. It was around this time as well that XP was still in its disaster phase. I remember I was maybe 2 months, not even, maybe a month into my job, and XP had just come out. We were still supporting Windows 98 at the time, and Windows ME. When we got those calls, we were just like, I'm gonna find any way I can't hang up on those customers. But anyways, but yeah, we had XP, and XP for the first while was really buggy and problematic, just because it was a new system and it was based on a new type of technology, quite different from Windows 98. When I was working at IBM, it was actually interesting because when 9/11 happened in the States, I was actually still in training, and it was the weirdest and spookiest thing. We were all just sort of doing our thing, and all of a sudden, all the phone lines in the call center went completely dead. Not a single person, maybe one person was on a call, finishing up a call or something, but every other line was completely dead. And the management had thought that there was phone routing issues or some technical issue, and that's why people weren't able to call in. And then eventually someone saw what was going on in the news, and this is what happened, that's why nobody's calling in. And basically for the entire day, basically nobody called in. The only people that would called in, and it was very few, like maybe one or two, because they didn't actually know what had happened in New York. My interview was also an interesting experience. I probably shouldn't have even gotten that job because I was quite a bit more forthcoming than I should have been in my interview. I remember saying something to the effect that, being good at your job and troubleshooting isn't dependent on how many certificates or education that you have, or how long you've been in university. I basically told the interviewer that their certificates are useless. What really makes a good tech support agent is that you have real-world experience. You have hand-on experience with fixing these things, and everything else is basically like, who cares, And I was kind of lucky because the interviewer totally agreed with me. He was one of these guys that appreciated that, and he wanted some good agents on the floor, not just a bunch of yes men, I guess. So that's how I got hired there. I found for the most part the IBM customers were not too difficult. I mean, you had some bad ones and you had some good ones. The thing is, when you're in the tech field, everyone calls you a genius or something like that. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But IBM, though, was much harder to deal with, I found, than the customers, because there's a lot of things I wanted to do for the customer that I wasn't able to do because it was against the policy, right? To ensure the resolution was fixed. Computers are fixed, customers happy, and then they don't have to call back and drive us crazy for the next year, right? And IBM had a line of machines at the time as well that were very cheaply made. And that isn't to say that IBM doesn't make some outstanding machines, especially in the server, well, not so much in the server market anymore, but the workstations and whatnot. They had some less than stellar lines of machines that had engineering issues. These were basically like the cheapest of the cheap type of machines, and they weren't really designed to last very long, and they just basically were trying to write them off as quickly as possible. And because of the engineering issues, it often resulted in weird issues cropping up with the computers that were basically unsolvable by the techs, and we were expected just to try to patch these issues or come up with some convoluted workarounds just to get the customer off the phone. Management refused to address the issue, and they only addressed the issue from what I been told is like 2 years later after the line has completely been disconnected anyway, so it was kind of like a moot point. I'd say too, I'm going to say there are some positive experiences in the call center as well. Granted, I mean, some people really like to talk all day, and that's fine. I mean, I can only talk for so long. I'm a little bit of an introvert before I start to get a little bit drained. But some of the positive things is that you don't actually have to see the customer. So a lot of awkward situations can be avoided, you know, if you're, I don't know, scratching your nose or something, maybe. I don't know. You can dress less than perfect. It's not such a big deal. I mean, some call centers have very strict dress codes. Others are more relaxed. It all depends on the company. If you don't come to work perfectly groomed, you know, it's not a big deal. The customer is not going to see you. Once in a while, you know, sometimes customers would give you appreciation and thanks for the actual work that you're helping them with, you know, and a good rating, and they'll give you a good reference, you know, like what are they used to? I don't remember what it was used called, but it was like this thing where they could send in a letter and then it would get posted on the wall and whatnot. So you know, you're also talking on the phone all day. There's no physical labor. I mean, I don't mind physical labor, and I don't mind talking on the phone so much. I'm kind of like a mix. I like to get out and about, but I also like to sit behind a desk sometimes too. So I'm kind of in both. For me, it's in both scenarios. If you're the kind of person that likes to sit at a desk all day and talk on the phone, then that's probably a call center is great for you. If you're the kind of guy that's really hands-on, then probably a call center is not for you. And of course, one of the best aspects of working in the call center, obviously, was the numerous funny phone calls that would come in and the ridiculous situations that just had to make you absolutely laugh. And, you know, obviously you can't laugh at the customer, but after the call, you're just like, okay, I need like 5 minutes just to friggin' laugh my ass off at this whole situation, obviously. So those are the things that kept us from going completely insane. And I guess the pay, I mean, the pay in the call centers depends on the call center. I mean, I've worked in call center, you know, some of the call centers would pay you really well, like especially in the technical side, you know, maybe $25 an hour if you're hired directly on and not outsourced. For the lower end call centers, you might be making, I mean, back in that day, you were making about $15, $16 an hour for the lower end stuff. So it was much better than the minimum wage. Now, I don't know what it's like to work in a call center to tell you what the rates pay would be, but I don't expect it to be very good, actually. Just because everything's been outsourced to India and other countries, I would expect to be pretty low. And of course, then there's a list. Long list of things about the call center that drive you up the wall and make you want to question your own sanity. And I created a list of these things, and I'm sure there's others, but here's my list anyways. Having to listen to customers scream at you for no good reason, okay? They just want to vent, and they just want to vent. They don't care who they vent at or why they're venting. They just want to vent on you, and they'll just do that until you either hang up the phone or just accept it, I guess. Having customers lie to you about their situations or who they are on the phone so they can get free service, and even after you expose that they're not who they say they are or that they're lying, you're still required to give them top-notch service with a smile despite their deceptiveness. You know, you take them at their word and you know they're lying to you, but you can't do anything about it. Having management and business intelligence constantly on your back about your call times and your hold times and your other statistics. Getting graded on quality assurance to make sure you use the proper number of keywords in your dialogue with the customer. Now, I understand there has to be quality assurance, but they tend to go overboard and be like, okay, if you don't use it this many times, you're going to get docked points, you know. Okay, I didn't say thank you 10 times in this call. You're gonna dock me points for this? Like, seriously, come on, have some common sense here. Having to kiss a customer, kiss customers, you know what, and apologize to someone, or apologize to the customer, I should rather say, when it's somebody else's mistakes or the company's mistakes, or you know, and so on. I mean, I didn't mind that so much, but you know, some people get frustrated after a while when they're constantly apologizing for somebody else's mistakes. Another aspect too is a lot of call centers you might make a mistake during the call, and they're like, oh geez, I made a mistake. But you know what? For the most part, you're not able to call the customer back in many cases because there's other calls coming. You got to take these calls. You can't just necessarily just call the customer back and say, oh geez, I made a mistake. With my business now, that's very easy to do. If something comes up and I remember something that a client needs to know, I just call them back right away or send them a message. I don't have to worry about like this whole queue coming in to distract me. Long queues were also very annoying. You can look up at their call centers have scoreboards, basically. Not all of them, but the ones I was in had scoreboards, and it'd be like, oh great, there's 78 calls in the queue when the average call time is 10 to 15 minutes. That's going to be really awesome. So by the time the customer gets to me, they're going to be waiting on the line for an hour, and they're going to be really ticked off at me. And so the first 5 to 10 minutes of the call is going to be me trying to de-escalate the customer. Joy, 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 joy. And sometimes these long call queues would actually happen because there might be multiple call centers for the same product or service, and one of the other call centers would go down and then the other would have to pick up the slack, and that's how you ended up with these long queues typically. You might be 1 minute left till the end of your shift as well, or lunchtime, and then you get a customer who has a serious issue and needs that hour-long phone call. I was just like, why me? And that happens quite often, and you're expected to finish it up. I know a lot of agents will come up with creative ways to try to avoid that. I'm not going to go into them, but anyways, they exist. Also, try to explain to someone that they need to click on this icon on the screen, and it's the only icon on the screen, and they somehow can't find it. And you spend 5 minutes going, okay, can you try on this side of the screen? Can you try on this side? Can you do this? And you just keep going in this loop with them, trying to get them to click. Just please, there's this little image on the screen. Just please click it twice with your mouse. Okay, I just need you to click that, please. Please. You get the idea. I mean, only people who worked in support centers for tech support would understand that. But anyways. We also had this one is absolutely, maybe not a negative, but it's absolutely glorious when you get to use it. It's the error that ends all errors of tech support. It's the ID 10T error, okay? The ID 10T error. This error, it's a very, very common error. And this is the error that comes up when you're basically at the end of your rope with the customer that you're talking with. For those who are good at researching or know how to use Google, you basically will figure it out very quickly what it means. Sometimes I would get away with using this error with the customer if I thought they were totally clueless, and I'd say something to the effect of, yes, Mr. Customer, there seems to be an ID 10T error that needs resolving. Let me fix that up for you post-haste. I do not mind whatsoever. The customer was totally oblivious to it. I would never use it in customers who had any, who maybe would get the idea. And I probably only used it maybe 2 or 3 times in my entire career. But when you do use it and you get away with it, it's just one of those glorious, glorious things. When the customer is just not following instructions, they're just generally all around bad. They're just driving you up the wall in every way possible. This is when you get the ID 10T errors coming out. I've also had situations where the caller would call in without the required information, or they're not calling from the address that they need to be at to fix the issue. Or at the computer, malfunctioning device, etc., and then they would expect us to fix it. And I swear that maybe almost up to 50% of the calls I would receive were basically me saying, can you please call back later when you're at the system in question? How would you like us to troubleshoot if you're not at the system? We don't even know if the computer's turned on at this point. So, they call back later. Customers would also call us when they were having, this happened a lot as well. Customers would call in when they're having major fights with their spouses. They're having fights with their kids. Kids or babies screaming in the background. You can't hear what they're saying, and they're distracted by that. And they're just otherwise distracted by so many other different things. And they're like, "Oh, can you do this?" And you're like, "What is going on over there? Like, sounds like someone's getting murdered. Like, why don't you go deal with that issue first, and then call us back later when you're not distracted," kind of a thing. On the very rare occasions, we would also get customers to call in and physically threaten us. And obviously, we took these very seriously, and we basically said we're going to have to hang up the phone and investigate this. And I got passed on to supervisors usually. Obviously, the customers that were making these threats, we wouldn't know if they were serious or not. I mean, I'm guessing probably 99% of the threats were basically hot air, because they don't even know where we are. For one thing, how would they come and find us? And they don't even know our last names. Usually we wouldn't say our last names on the phone. I mean, it was just one of those things just for our own safety. Because you do get, once in a while, get those really irate customers, and they will, there have been occasions where they have gone and seeked out the agent to try to physically harm them. Customers would also call up as well, telling us they know exactly what the issue is. And I admit I do this as well, but that's only because I am in a position to be able to do that, because I worked on so many different ends of the spectrum and both sides of the coin, kind of speak. They would call us up and tell us, "Okay, I know what the issue is, and I need you to fix it. I'm an expert at this. I'm an expert at that. I'm this person. You got to fix it right now. This is what you got to do. Just do it." Da 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 da. Meanwhile, we're thinking to ourselves, well, if you're such an expert on the problem, why didn't you just fix it yourself? Especially when it comes to like fixing your own computer. You don't need us to do anything to fix your computer. You can just fix it. Things when I was working for Verizon, obviously that wasn't the case, because I mean, unless it was something like the modem was unplugged. Okay, I mean, that was a very common thing with Verizon when I was working there. Modem's unplugged, power's unplugged, you know, just very basic stuff that was happening. And they'd be like, "Oh, is that what was wrong?" Or, you know, cat pulled out the plug, kids pulled out the plug, you know, and whatever, and stuff like that. You also get customers that called in who would say, "It is all your fault that this is happening. I swear nothing has changed. This shouldn't be happening." Then after troubleshooting for an hour, you determine that it is indeed the customer error, and or somebody was playing a joke on the customer to intentionally mess them up, or maybe a kid did something to their machine or their service, or their dog or cat did something. I've heard lots of stories where animals have chewed through cables and stuff like that, and they're like, "Well, it's all your fault. It's all your fault. Can't be anything possibly over here." And then you find out, "Oh, look, your cat chewed through the telephone cord." Good. And after troubleshooting for an hour to try to figure out what the issue is. As well, a lot of customers would try to hide that they intentionally messed up their systems and technology as well. And this would be primarily, I found a lot of the cases was because of file sharing or porn websites, and you know, they didn't want to admit that they were into that kind of stuff, and it was messing up their computer and whatnot. Oops. So we'd have to try to work it through that. Customers as well that don't follow instructions and do their own thing. So you'd be like, "Can you please click on this icon?" And then they would say, "Oh, no, okay, just 1 second. I'm going to try something first. I think this might work." And then they'd be like, "Okay, did that work? No, okay." Then they'd be like, "Okay, can we try this instead?" And then they'd be, oh, no, I know what it is now. Okay, I'm going to try. Oh, that's so frustrating. Oh, boy, bringing up the memories of the call center days. We'd also get customers who would call up, and this could go for any call center. They would want to detail the recollection of their entire account on file, a listing of all billing information from the entire year, and they want you to look up everything and explain it to them slowly so they can, I don't know, write it down and understand what's going on with their account. And then you open up their account and you realize that there are over 200 entries or 400 entries or some ridiculous number of entries in their account, and you're like, oh my goodness, I'm going to be on this call forever. Oh, so you're thinking of ways to get off the call, trying to get the customer off the line. You're like, well, don't you have a statement? Didn't we send you a statement? I think you have statements. Go. Can you go check and see if you have any statements? And it's going to be the same information that I have. And then, or they'll be like, no, not really. I don't really have the statements. I don't know. They're lost. I don't know. They're in a box somewhere. I don't know. I moved last month. Whatever. Oh, okay. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I can send you a statement. You know what? Let me just resend you all the statements from last year, and then you could just look them over for yourself. Kind of an idea. Like, oh no, you know what? That's gonna take time. It's gonna be in the mail. I'd rather if you just list them off to me. I don't have to be anywhere right now. I got lots of time on my hands. And then you're thinking to yourself, oh, geez. Okay, what else can I try? And then at some point, you're just like, oh, for the love of God, just let me send you a statement. And you're just like, okay, you know what? Thank you for calling today. I'm going to send you the statement, and just hang up the phone. Click. I mean, I don't really condone that, but, sometimes you just have to be a little creative in what you're doing. We also used to receive calls from customers who would also always joke around about the Canadian accent, saying, oh, what about that, eh? Or trying to imitate the Canadian accent, which I don't even know if I can do properly. And then they would insist that I say about, okay? They'd say, oh, please say about. It sounds like you're saying aboot. And I'd be like, well, okay, if it's going to get us on with the call, and just I don't want to talk about this about thing, and then you're like trying in your best voice and best pronunciation to say about, and they're like, and then you're declaring to them, I don't certainly sound like that, and then meanwhile they're laughing at you, like, oh jeez, that's so annoying. Anyways, that only applies to the Canadian customer or the Canadian agents. And there's always, as well, the customers who would always just talk and never stop about basically anything. They would just talk about anything under the sun. They would call up expecting, just wanted to talk to someone. They don't really care what's going on with their system, their account, or anything. They're just calling up to talk to somebody, and they would just, you're trying to find creative ways to get them off the phone. Okay, wow, there's certain words you start to use after a while. It's like, wow, that's so exciting, or truly interesting. And then you'd be like, yeah, I understand, totally, certainly. And you're just like, oh, geez, how long is this going to go on for? And then there were the smarty pants customers who were basically always saying, oh, I'm like the best, I'm like the smartest, I'm like so awesome, I'm like the CEO, I'm so important, you don't know who I am, I'm like the best thing since sliced bread, and they're like, when I got those types of customers, I'm like, oh yeah, this will be interesting. So I had a technique for these types of people where I'd respond to them with to try to get them back on track and get them to tell me what their issue is. I would respond to them usually with super technical jargon that they couldn't possibly understand. Not they were going to understand to begin with, but it's just, I just want to kind of dumbfound them, just to make them make their head rattle a little bit. And I'd be like, oh, Mr. Smith, I know exactly what the problem is. That ultra high frequency of your DSL connection is generating RF interference from a nearby electrical tower transformer and is causing a feedback loop in the grid, which has caused by a sunspot that happened last night of 15 degrees north and 12 degrees latitude. It was most certainly bouncing off the EFI capacitor that the neighbor has installed in their groundwater extraction unit. If you could just isolate the flux combobulator, I would believe you could effectively set the angle straight and get your internet back up and working. And I used to mix a lot of BS in with real terminology so they wouldn't totally catch on to what I was doing. But at the same time, it would kind of confuse them. And when they heard this, they're like, oh, well, maybe he does know what he's talking about. Let's just, maybe we should trust him. And yeah, it did shut them up for the majority of the cases. And then we could move on with the phone call. There are also customers who simply couldn't follow directions no matter how much hand-holding you did and no matter how much you simplified it for them. And I could also tell usually when they were lying to me about the actions they had performed in a troubleshooting issue because the reaction or the response from the computer was not exactly what it should have been. And when they started doing this, and when I knew they were doing this, I would run them through some simple steps to attempt to confuse them a little bit and make them forget about the actual troubleshooting steps that I wanted them to do. So for instance, I would first run them through a bunch of random troubleshooting steps that had no bearing on the issue whatsoever. And I did this sort of just to distract them, okay? Because they're like, first they're going to be saying like, oh yeah, I did all those steps, and I'll be, yeah, sure you did, because those steps don't actually exist, right? Obviously. And then I'd run them through the actual troubleshooting steps again, knowing that they probably wouldn't do it this time either. And then it'd be like, okay, yeah, I did that. Why isn't this fixed? Like, just what's wrong with you, kind of a thing. Okay, let's try something else, and then I'd run them through rebooting the computer. Like, well, let's try rebooting the computer. I mean, obviously, rebooting the computer can work in some situations, but in these situations, I knew it wasn't. We already had tried rebooting the computer. Let's reboot it again. I think there's something changed now, kind of a thing. And they're just like, okay, let's reboot it. Kind of grumpy. And then again, after the reboot, I'd run them again through a set of random troubleshooting steps just to see if they were catching on to what I was doing, or if they were actually trying to do in these steps. Because if they were doing these random troubleshooting steps, I'd know for sure that they wasn't doing what's supposed to be doing, and they would come up with errors or something to that effect. So I do this a few times and rinse and repeat kind of an idea, and then they would finally they'd be like, oh, they realize they're not getting anywhere, and they would actually start listening to the troubleshooting steps that we needed to do to fix their issue. So this usually happened 3 or 4 times this cycle before they would actually do it. And then when the issue was finally resolved, which would have been probably a 5-minute issue, ended up turning into a 50-minute issue. And then they'd be like, oh, wow, you're such a genius, man. Like, geez, like, I'm going to send you, like, a case of cigars. You're so awesome. And sometimes you get these old gentlemen who don't know too much about technology, but they're suit wearing, they're probably millionaires, and they're like, have this very raspy voice, and they're like, yeah, that's so awesome of you. I wish I could come there and shake your hand, kind of an idea. Oh, it was funny. And obviously I knew it was just a bunch of BS, because honestly they just didn't want to troubleshoot it, they didn't want to take the time to do it, and they just thought that somehow we could magically fix it for them. But after a while they realized that they had to do something to get it fixed. Some of my most memorable experiences, we'll start first at IBM, was the CD-ROM cup holder incident. And I know what you're saying, this is actually a common one, but it actually happened to me, and it happened to other agents in the call center. Well, it probably happens to a lot of agents back in the day. So if you don't know what the CD-ROM cup holder is, I'm going to explain it to you. So there was a customer that called in one time, and they were very upset that their cup holder had broken on their brand new IBM desktop, okay? So, as you know, CD-ROMs, they have a tray that pops out. You press a button. Obviously, newer machines generally don't have CD-ROMs anymore, but they used to have CD-ROMs and DVD-ROMs. You press it, and the tray would open up, okay? So the customer had thought, okay, so in the middle of the CD-ROM tray, there's this big hole, and the reason for that hole was because so that the laser could could actually read the disk. And actually, there was a secondary reason for that, is because the tray would allow you to put in these smaller type of discs in there. So there's actually these smaller type of business cards, actually about half the size of business card discs that you actually put in there. And they're very rare, but that's the reason why the hole was there. So the customer was opening this up, and I guess while they're using the computer, they thought, oh, well, this tray they didn't know what a CD-ROM was. They didn't know what a CD was. So they just opened it up, and they said, oh, well, look, this must be a cup holder. Look, there's a hole in the bottom. And, you know, you take a coffee cup, like a paper coffee cup, and it fits just nicely in the CD tray, and it just holds it there. But in the meantime, I'm trying to think, the customer's like saying, oh, the cup holder broke. And I'm racking my brain trying to figure out what the heck are you talking about? These things don't come with cup holders. Like, can you describe this thing to me? Like, yeah, okay, that's an IBM machine. I understand that. And Well, what are you talking about, this cup holder? So I'm like running them through. Okay, is it at the bottom of the machine? Is it at the top of the machine? You know, oh, you have to press a button to open. Okay, well, what on the system? Okay, what buttons are on the system? Okay, there's a power button. Okay, well, the power button doesn't pop anything out. Okay, there's another button for a reset. Oh, well, no, that doesn't pop. And I'm like, is it at the top of the machine? And I'm like, oh yeah, it's on top of the machine. It's white. Oh, and in IBM cases, sometimes it's black cases. Oh yeah, it's black. I just hit the button, the tray pops out, and then I put the cup in, and yeah. So obviously this thing wasn't meant to hold cups, and the thing with these desktop computers is that the tray can automatically try to close once you put a disk in. So if you put a cup in there, thing's going to try to close on the cup. So it may either spill or just break the tray. And they were really upset that this cup holder broke. Well, why? And they're like, why is the cup holder trying to close when I put a cup in there? Like, there must be some defect with this thing, I think. Oh, geez. How do I explain to the customer that it's a CD-ROM and not a cup holder without making them look like a total idiot? So, I mean, that's one of my best stories from IBM. My second best story from IBM, I mean, I had a lot, but my second best story was a customer had called up. They purchased a brand new machine from us, and they didn't know anything about computers, but they knew just enough to be dangerous, okay? What that means is that they knew how to get around the system, but they didn't know exactly what it is that they were doing. So they went and trashed their entire system, and the thing was like unrecoverable. No amount of tinkering with it was going to fix the damage that they had done to their Windows installation. So I'm like, oh, I think I spent like 20 minutes on the phone. I'm like, you know what? This is a write-off. We're just going to have to do a factory reset and restore you. This is a brand new machine. You've only had it for a week. Just restore it. You know, it's not a big deal. You're not going to really... it's not going to be really that big of a deal, right? It's not like you've loaded up with a ton of programs yet and stuff. I'm like, yeah, you should be fine. You know, what could have you possibly done in 1 week? And the customer's like... well, if I do a factory reset, am I going to lose all my files? I'm like, yeah, unfortunately, you will. You'll have to back them up first. We don't support helping you back up your stuff, but you're going to have to back them up on your own. And she's like, well, here's the thing. I in this past week, I've been downloading some music, and I don't want to lose this music. I'm like, well, how did you get this music? Oh, well, we got it from... was it Napster? Or I think I got some from Kazaa. And like back in the day, these were popular file sharing networks where you could download pirated music. And I'm like, well, I can't officially support you pirating music on the internet. And I'm like, well, you know, if it's just a few songs, I mean, you could just back it up to a CD. If you have some blank CDs or something, you could just back it up to a blank CD and you'd be fine, right? The software is included on the system. Just you know, you can back it up. The instructions are there. You should be fine. I'm not going to help you do it, but you can do it. And she's like, well, the thing is, I don't have any blank CDs. I'm like, okay, well, you should probably go get some blank CDs. She wasn't really too fussy about doing that whole CD-ROM backup thing. Well, and she's like, well, I mean, if it's not that bad, maybe you could just back them up to some other external drive. I mean, USB drives weren't really big back then, and you know, like the biggest one was, I don't know, like 512 megabytes or something, like the size of a CD at the time, and they didn't have that either. So I'm like, well, how much music could you possibly download in this time? And she's like, well, I think I've downloaded 20,000 songs. And I'm just long pause on the phone. I'm just like, oh, you seriously managed to download 20,000 pirated music MP3s in a week? And I'm just like, well, I'm definitely not supporting this BS that's going on here. This is absolutely ridiculous. Who downloads 20,000 songs in a week? And she's like, she was getting very sort of sad and upset. I'm gonna lose this MP3 collection that she illegally obtained anyways. I'm like, I don't care. In my head, I'm like, I don't care at this point. Let's just do the restore. I don't care about your MP3 collection. And she's like, well, I'm gonna lose all these things. Oh, she was whining on the phone, and I was like, oh, jeez, she's gonna start throwing a pity party for herself. And then she's like, well, isn't there any other way I can back it up, if I don't want? And I'm like, well, I was kind of being like facetious. I was just like, well, you could just go buy some floppy disks. And and I don't think she quite understood how much music you could actually store on one floppy disk, because basically, if I remember correctly, I think back then you could probably store one song per floppy disk. So if she had actually went out and bought floppy disks, she would need probably 20,000 floppy disks to back up her music collection. And I kind of feel bad for her that I said that, but at the same time, I'm like, you know what? I have no sympathy for someone who's downloading that much pirated music. Go buy some music. Support your artists a little bit, at least. Come on. So she reluctantly start the factory restore process on the machine. I'm like, okay, it's going to take this long. It's probably going to take about 3 hours before it finishes. You should see this on the screen, etc., etc., etc. When that main part of the process is finished, call us back, and then we can direct you through the rest of the restore process. And then so I left her. She hung up the phone, and then she called back the next day, and one of the other agents who sat beside me got her, and he was saying, yeah, hey Stuart, you remember that lady you talked to yesterday? She called up and she was so sad. She was almost crying that she had lost her MP3 collection. She said, oh, that agent, he was so mean to me. He made me format my computer, and I had all these MP3s on it. Oh my goodness. I mean, that was, yeah, I feel a little bit sorry for her, but at the same time it's funny. Like, how do you download that much music in that short of time? So those were some really good experiences at IBM. And then when I was working at ShopNBC, I don't remember too much about my ShopNBC days. I don't know why. I guess it was pretty bland for the most part, but there were a couple things that stood out for me, and that was the rich New Yorker. There was this one lady who was a multi-millionaire and probably maybe even a billionaire. She would order so much stuff off the shopping channel that she didn't even know what she had ordered. Basically, her account had thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of lines worth of orders that she had done over the past, I don't know, 6 years or something like that. And it was her regular habit to order stuff off the shopping channel every week. She'd probably order 20 to 30 items off the ShopNBC network every week. And then every week she would call up at the end of the week, or sometimes in the beginning of the week, or even twice a week, and be like, okay, can we go over like the last 50 or 60 orders on my account? I just want to make sure I know what I ordered and what I spent. I'm just thinking to myself, oh. And pretty much every agent in our call center got her at least once during our time there. And we'd have, and those were long calls, like some 2-hour calls just to explain to her. I mean, I guess, you know, she's spending millions of dollars with us. I mean, I guess the least we can do is spend 2 hours on the phone with her to tell her, give her a breakdown of what she had bought, because she didn't remember what she had bought. Another experience I had about ShopNBC too as well. It's not necessarily funny, but a lot of the diamonds rings that we sold, or rings with gems in them, they didn't have a warranty on it, which is unfortunate. So what would happen is a lot of customers would get these rings and the gem would fall out within a week or two, and because there was no warranty, we couldn't do anything about it. And unfortunately, this is kind of a common thing. I didn't know if it was a customer issue, that they were rough with the ring and the gems were falling out, or if it was maybe they weren't set right. I don't know. I'm not going to say. I just don't know. But that was another thing that really stuck out. It kind of made me sad for the customers. They might be spending $1,000 on a ring and then it's basically worthless. Unfortunate. And then to the last call center I worked in Verizon, there were some very interesting stories in there as well. This one's not so funny, but it was an interesting tale nonetheless. So one of the other agents, isn't my story. I think this happened on to one of my friends who was working in presidential appeals. They had this repeat customer that was calling up constantly. No one was able to fix the issue. It was just sucking up resources. They sent out texts so many times to try to resolve the issue, replacing wiring, replacing modems, replacing this and that, and still there was never a resolution. What was happening is that the customer's DSL service kept getting knocked out. They would lose service every day around the same time for about an hour or two. And no one could figure out what the heck was going on. They were replacing equipment left, right, center. They thought it was the computer issue, is this issue, and nobody could figure it out. So it eventually went to presidential appeals, which is like the highest level sort of appeal you can get through the company. I'm not even sure if I should be saying that's an actual department. It probably doesn't exist anymore because the call center is long gone. But anyways, so it got to that department. So they got approval to send out a technician at the exact time that this was happening every day to the central office to investigate what was going on. Basically, they sent a technician there to basically spend 2 hours at the central office to watch the customer's line and find out exactly what it was that was going on. Because most times when you send out a technician, they wouldn't go there when the issue was happening. You know, the techs can't just sit around all day and wait for something to happen, right? So they actually got approval to do this. Okay, go sit out there for 2 hours, find out what's going on. So it turned out that there was a custodian that was clean. They would go in every day into the central office, and they would do their cleaning shift, and they would go in at the same time every day, and they had a cell phone on them. It was like a cell phone for the company, so that they could, if there was a problem, they could just call up and say, okay, we need you to do this or something, right? So he would walk in there every day, and he would do his cleaning routine, and he would take his cell phone, and it had a large magnet attached to it, and he would take the cell phone and then attach it to the side of the D-slam, and the D-slam is a piece of equipment where all the outside DSL connections come into, and then they transfer over to a signal that switches and other routing technology can understand. So he was putting the cell phone in the same spot almost every day, and right on this D-slam, and the magnet and the cell phone would be interfering with the customer's DSL connection. And when he went in, the tech went in there and realized, oh, what's the cell phone doing attached? And he pulls it off, and boom, the service starts working. So I thought that was an interesting story. Just one of those things where some weird things can happen once in a while. There was also one time when I was working for Verizon. I think it was Verizon. It could have been for IBM. I don't remember exactly now. But there was a time where I was having a really bad day with my calls, and every caller that was calling, almost every caller was calling in was having a bad day. They were swearing, they're yelling, they have major issues. And they would be, I had 3 or 4 customers calling that day already, requesting to speak to a supervisor without even me letting to ask them what the issue is. They were like, right away, I want to speak to your supervisor. I want to speak to your supervisor, and that happened like 3 or 4 times that day. And I'm like, okay, this can't happen anymore. I'm just like, I'm done. This is not happening again. So I got another call, and the customer right away was like, I want to speak to your supervisor. I'm like, oh, not again. Like, this is the day from hell here. And I'm like, no, No, you're not speaking to my supervisor. Like, what do you mean you're not speaking to my supervisor? Put your supervisor on the phone. You gotta put your supervisor on the phone. And I'm like, no, I'm not putting my supervisor on the phone. And again, he's like, well, you gotta put your supervisor. I've been having this issue, blah, blah, blah. It's been talked to like 10 people already. This issue's not resolved. I want to speak to your supervisor. No, I'm like, no. You're not speaking to my supervisor. And I was just very plain and blunt, and like, no, you're not speaking to my supervisor. I don't care how many times you ask for a supervisor. I mean, then it was 3 times. You're supposed to transfer them to a supervisor. I'm like, no, I'm not transferring to a supervisor again. This is going to look bad on me if I had like 4 supervisor transfers in one day. No. Do you want to solve the issue? I'm not transferring you to a supervisor. Like, no, transfer me now. Getting really frustrated. I'm like, no. Yeah, well, we just solved the issue. I think I did this probably for about 5 to 10 minutes before the customer said, okay, let's do this, kind of reluctantly, like, fine, let's get this resolved. I'm pretty sure, yeah, I think it was a pretty difficult issue, if I remember correctly, and it did take me a while to solve, but eventually it did get solved. And it's just one of those funny things, like, no, you're not speaking to my supervisor. I will do everything in my power not to put you on the phone. I'm just not going to hit that button at all. So that was a pretty funny incident as well. We also had one agent on the floor too who was kind of had the nickname of the screaming agent because this agent would, I don't know how she managed to keep her job, but she would regularly get into screaming matches with the customers. The thing was, she would get into calls with customers, and the customer would be irate and then make some attack about her, but she didn't realize that it was not really directed at her. The customer was just frustrated, so she would take it personally, and every time she took it personally, she would get upset, and then she would say something back to the customer, and the customer would get more angry, and then she would get more angry, and she got into these arguments with the customers, and she'd be like flailing her arms around in the air, and she'd be screaming like, no, this is not how it is. She did that a few times. I think after a while someone probably said something, she couldn't do that, but it was just funny watching her fly off the handle at the customer. The customer's probably thinking like, what the heck is going on? Like, is she insane? Oh, funny times. And then there was another funny story I had with Verizon, because I worked in call centers so often. I was getting used to speaking with customers who were in the southern U.S., and because I was so used to it, I actually started picking up their accent on occasion without realizing it. So I had one customer call in one time, and I managed to get through the whole introduction spiel and some of the preliminary questions about what was going on with their service. And there was a bit of a pause because they didn't say anything back right, but then they said, hey, you must be from the South. I'm so used to speaking to people with a New York or northern states, northern U.S. accent. And I'm like, thinking to myself, well, what do you mean? I'm Canadian. I speak like I'm probably from the northern states. It should be the same accent. And then it was at that moment that I realized that I was speaking with a broken southern accent, and I was almost like imitating the accent without actually trying to. And then I'm like, I was kind of like, oh geez, what did I just do? And then I spoke normally to the customer. Oh no, I'm from Canada. I'm from Canada. And then the customer probably thought I was mocking him at that time, because then I was speaking in my normal voice, but I didn't realize I was speaking with a broken southern accent, kind of like a accent, someone from, I don't know, not Florida, but maybe South Carolina or something to that effect. And, sort of like a country bump, what we would call country bumpkins here in Canada, someone who, has that thick accent, He probably thought I was mocking him. And there was a long pause. Like, I think he was like, are you insulting me? But I don't think he really wanted to call me out on it. He wasn't maybe sure if it was legitimate or if I was just made a mistake and I was sorry about it. But I did manage to fix his issue anyways, and then he thanked me at the end of the call. But it was just one of those funny things I didn't realize I was doing. And then for my Verizon days as well, for the most part, one of the things that stood out for me, well, I wouldn't say it stood out, it was just part of my job really, was I was taking when I first started out, I was taking SHDSL calls, level 3 support. So SHDSL is a specialized DSL service. It's more like a dedicated connection than a regular DSL service. So you don't need filters or any specialized equipment. Basically, you just need the phone line, but it has to be a dedicated phone line. And then you get better uploads and downloads on it than you would with regular DSL service, and a more reliable service. But these calls didn't come in that often, so what they would do is they gave us one of my other responsibilities was also approving agent approval tickets, as well as helping agents solve an issue if they couldn't solve it themselves. So we were expected to have 3 chats with agents open at any given time at most. Now, it didn't always happen to be 3 at a time, but a lot of times it was 3 at a time during busy periods. I was expected to take a phone call at the same time. Now, with the SHDSL calls, they didn't come in nearly as often. They probably, maybe there's 3 of us in that entire queue for SHDSL, and then maybe there was only 10 or 15 calls a day into the entire queue. So, that part wasn't so bad, but when you get on a call and then you have 3 agents chatting with you at the same time, expecting to help them with their problems and then approve a ticket. And then on top of that, we were expected to take customer chats over the internet. So we could have some of those open as well. I don't think they allowed us more than 2 at a time, but you could tell that people were starting to get a little frustrated with us because I'm trying to focus on 5 different things at once, and when it's busy, it just got kind of ridiculous. On downtimes, like later at night, it's pretty relaxed. We might get one chat going, and once in a while a phone call comes in and stuff like that. But during busy times, it was pretty hard to manage. And this, I think, is my last story from Verizon. There was one, it might have been Verizon, or I'm not sure, can't remember which call center this was from now, but there was one particularly irate customer, and they heaped on every abuse onto me humanly possible. They were swearing at me, they were abusing me, they were calling the company yada yada yada, they were screaming and yelling, and they weren't stopping it. And being in the call center for this amount of time, I was already starting to get a little numb to people screaming at me and just being generally irate, and I was not really caring what they were saying. It's not personal. They're just ranting and raving for whatever reason. I don't really care why they're ranting and raving. I just gotta sit there and listen to it a bit. So I kind of let it go on for about 5 minutes. They were ranting and raving, and their throat was starting to get a little sore because they were screaming so much. So I saw my opportunity to interject and try to get a word into the call. I said, "Okay, I'm not using a real name. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Are you finished now, or do you think you would like to continue on with this phone call?" And this completely floored the customer. They weren't expecting such a dry and uncaring response. They were expecting me to react to their insults. But I wasn't having any of it, and after a long pause, they kind of sighed and said, "Oh, okay, well, let's get this problem sorted out." Like, they were just totally expecting a reaction. Generally, when the customer's being that abusive, you're allowed to just hang up on them. Just say, "Okay, if you continue this, we're going to hang up on you," and the customer wasn't stopping. So I could have just hung up on them, but, I was just like, yeah. It's interesting. I'd say, "You know what? Are you done yet? Are you done? Are you done ranting and raving? Are you done?" So that one was a particularly memorable experience. And again, I managed to solve their issue, if I remember correctly. I pretty much solved almost every issue eventually, even if I had to call them back a day later, or send it off to somebody who could solve the issue. It's just one of those experiences that stuck out for me. Some other things we used to do in the call center as well. These are not stories per se, but these are things that you can maybe do to the other agents. These are pranks that you can play on other agents if you still work in a call center. Try them if you dare. So one of our most epic call center pranks that I remember is that you would find a spare mouse and you run the cable under your cubicle into another agent's cubicle and then plug the mouse into the back of their system. And this is when USB was a thing, obviously. So USB mice Windows picks up USB mice automatically. It's great. Simple. So you kind of hide the mouse in your cubicle. Don't let the other agent know it's there. And then when the agent comes back from their break or whatever that they were doing, going to the bathroom, they log into their computer and they start trying to do things. And then you just move the mouse around a little slowly, but kind of mimic their movements a little bit. And then they're just starting to get a little frustrated. What's going on with my mouse? Why is it moving kind of a little bit erratically? And then you pick up the pace a little more, maybe make it jump around the screen a little bit. And then when they go to click on something, you're just kind of looking over your shoulder, you click on something, you just move the mouse off the button a little bit just so they can't, and then they start getting really frustrated. Like, what the heck is going on? I gotta talk to the IT department. What's going on with this piece of junk? We had some interesting experiences doing that. I mean, after doing that a few times, people started to catch on, but it was nonetheless funny. If you've been in the call center, you've never seen somebody do that, maybe try that. It can be quite a funny experience. Sometimes things we'd also do to each other as well in the call center was pawn off bad customers to other agents. I don't necessarily condone this, but this is what was happening. So if you're having a bad day and you just want to not take a call, some agents would get a call and they would say, "Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Customer, you've reached the wrong department. Let me transfer you to the correct department." And the customer was actually in the right department, so what they were actually doing is just transferring back into the same queue. And if they timed it right, they could do it so that they wouldn't get the same customer back, right? So that was kind of a trick that some agents would do if they were trying to, I don't know, kind of fudge their statistics, or they were just having so many bad calls in a row and they just needed a break or something like that, maybe, I don't know. We would also sometimes play the sympathy game with the customer. That is, we would say something to the effect of, "I totally agree with you. Our agency is a bunch of bleep, 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 bleeps. You should totally escalate this to the supervisor." And then without any warning, proceed to cold transfer the call to the supervisor that you hate the most on the floor. And then before you can they can pick up the phone, you hit the transfer button so they don't know who it's coming from. So, I mean, that happened as well. I mean, yeah. People who did that were pretty much on their last days of the call center, so it's not something you would do if you were expecting to keep your job. Another thing sometimes agents would do to drive other agents crazy was leave cryptic notes on the account for the next agent. So instead of saying, for example, "This customer has been having issues with so-and-so," but instead of saying that, they would write this: "Cuss out of and give CU help. Call over." And you're looking at it like, what did they do? What did it? Cuss out of and give CU help. Call over. What is this even English? And then you're like looking at, oh, well, does that mean customer is out of service and you give help? Oh, gave customer help. Call over. Oh, is that what they meant? Okay, that was awesome. Yeah, so that was one thing that kind of drove us a little batty sometimes when they didn't leave very good notes on the account. The interesting thing about, to sum up all the experiences with my days at call centers, it has actually given me a unique ability to taunt companies and agents when I am the one that needs to call in for something. If I really need someone in a call center to do something, I know all the tricks of the trade to make stuff happen. And if they don't make it happen, then I know how to drive them absolutely crazy in the process. I really stick it to them sometimes. I admit it. Sometimes when I call into certain companies, I am the worst customer ever. Worst customer ever. But I do it on purpose to companies who genuinely deserve it and who don't care about customer care whatsoever. I would use their own call center techniques against them. Now, I wouldn't do this normally, but in certain circumstances, I would do this. For instance, I had one. This was when I was still living in Toronto. I once had a Bell sales rep call me to sell me internet service, DSL service of all things, and I told the barely speaking English agent that, you know what, no thanks. I already have a dedicated DSL service. It's very similar to SHDSL with one of their direct suppliers, which was basically already Bell. It wasn't labeled Bell, but it was through Bell's system already. So, you know, Bell's getting the money anyway. So, like, why are you trying to sell me service again? Worse service. Despite all this, she felt the need to try to upsell me this worse internet service than what I already had. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not doing anything right now. I'm just watching TV. I said, okay, lady, let's game on. I didn't actually say that to her, but in my mind, I was like, let's game on. I'm going to take you on a roller coaster ride here. So it was obvious from the onset that she didn't know too much about the technical side of DSL. And I used that to my advantage. I barraged her with a series of ultra technical questions that I knew she couldn't answer. And one by one, I made her try to find the answer to each of these questions. And each time, she'd put me on hold for 2 to 3 minutes while she tried to find the answer, or speaking to a supervisor to try to find the answer. Meanwhile, I was playing a little dumb to her, like, oh, well, you know, I heard about this. What about hacking or something like that? I heard this on the news that hacking could be a problem. And she'd go off and run and try to find the answer again. Meanwhile, I'm watching TV, not really paying too much attention to the call. And it's funny because this went on for over an hour. And every time she came back, I would lure her in again in the hopes that she would try to sell me something. Just when she thought she was going to give up, I would like, oh, well, you know what? This actually does sound interesting, you know. But, you know, the price is not bad. But you know what? Do you think this would happen? And to lure her back and make her think she's going to get the sale. Eventually, she caught on, obviously, and to what I was doing. And obviously she couldn't help me with the questions, and she basically said, obviously I can't help you today. I'm gonna hang up the call now. Basically, I don't remember her exact words. I mean, she was obviously using a script to the T, and because she was using a script and she didn't know how to deviate from it, she couldn't think for herself. That's what kind of threw her for a loop. And that's a big issue with call centers. If you're too by the book and too by the script, it's going to come back to bite you in the end. So at that point, I was like, if you're going to waste my time and not listen to what I actually have to say, then I'm going to turn around and waste your time. So she didn't get the sale. No sale for you. I've also done this as well to many scammers. You know, scammers, everyone's had scammers try to call them. So intentionally, I'll work around their script to keep them on the line, speak in such a way that they can't understand me. Sometimes I pretend to be an old lady. I mean, I don't know if they actually believe that I was an old lady, but they stay on the line anyways. Sometimes I pretended to be a pizza delivery service. I'd be like, thank you for calling Stu's Pizza. Would you like extra pepperoni on your pizza, please? What would you like today? You know, to sort of make up sort of scenarios for them. And they're like, sort of wonder what's going on, but they still try to rope you in anyways. And they're like, why didn't you just hang up right away? And then I would also pretend to follow their instructions, you know, kind of troll them a bit on purpose, you know. No scam for you. And then in one of my most recent experiences with a tech company, which was Adobe of all. Don't get me started on Adobe again. But anyways, There was a day about 2 months ago that I was absolutely fed up with their trashy software, constantly full of bugs, constant increases in their cloud pricing. Every version seems to remove key features that actually worked, and the generally horrible user interface that has a mind of its own. And on top of that, they expect you to, if you have a problem, they expect you to go to their support site instead of calling them, and then instead of providing direct support, they give you these canned responses on a form, taking days and days to solve an issue. There was one issue I had over a year ago. It was with Dreamweaver. It was essentially broken in some respect because the secure FTP connection was broken. It wouldn't let you connect to it. And I put this ticket in over a year ago, and they still weren't solving it, and they were not doing really anything about it. A lot of people are having the same issue. It was like 9 months before they even acknowledged there was an issue, and I had to have a workaround just to use it. And because of situations like that, I had enough with Adobe at that point. So I popped open their chat window to see if I could get an agent, and I got an agent, and I managed to keep the chat window open for 2.5 hours without doing much of anything other than wasting their time, because I knew they weren't going to fix any issue I had anyway. So what's the point? I could spend an hour in the chat with them, and they're just going to make some excuse, blah 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 blah. Maybe the next version it'll be fixed, or blah, blah, whatever. I don't care. So I did this. I kept them on the chat for 2.4 hours. I didn't give them my name or my account number. I think I gave them a fake name eventually. I always gave them generalizations about the issues I was having. I'd never give them a direct issue, right? I wouldn't reply to their canned responses, and I'd kind of pretend that I was disconnected. And then they obviously had a policy in place that they would disconnect you if you didn't respond within, I think it was like 5 minutes or something like that. So every time they did that, I would just go back to the chat, put in some little one-word answer, some dots after, I'm still here, right? I did that at least 20 times. She wanted to really get off the chat with me, I could tell. But I kept doing that. I kept her on the line, used their own techniques against them. I demanded to speak to a supervisor over the chat, and this one really... Actually, and it was escalating to the developers, not the supervisor, but the developers themselves. And this one really threw them a look like, you can't chat with the developers. They're doing other things. They're not going to chat with you. But, I kept demanding, I want to talk to the developers. I want to talk to the developers. Totally messing with them. And as well, telling them instead of solving my issue today, I wanted them to go to... they have a system where you can post bug reports. There's a whole list of bug reports from Adobe products. You can go in there and submit requests. So I kept requesting them. I want you to go to their bug reports form and pick one of the issues at random and solve it. That's all I want you to do. I don't care which issue it is. And they're like she was making it, oh, we don't know how to go to the forums. We can't do that, That would be like violate privacy. They're making all these excuses. I don't have access to it. Blah blah blah. Yeah, right. Eventually, they figured out how to go and access the bug form. Whether they actually did or not, I don't know. Maybe they were just lying to me, but whatever. Another thing I was doing to them was I would tell Adobe that they're a useless company. I'd make other disparaging remarks about the company. But I wouldn't go too far. I would just go just to the point. I knew where that fine line was where they would consider it abuse. So I go just before that point where they would have to hang up on me or close the chat on me, I should say. Threaten to disconnect me. Okay? So... I did that a few times, just to waste time, basically. And then there was one time I actually crossed the line a little bit, and I said, it won't happen again. It won't happen again. I think I might have done that a couple more times as well. I just crossed the line a little bit, just say, Adobe's like utter trash. You guys can't do anything or something like that, And then basically that whole thing, I just rinse and repeat that whole process. It was it's like the agent, based on their, they have their scripts, and they have some sort of weird program. It's like a programming loop. Maybe it was a bot that was I don't know, maybe it was a bot that was automatically responding to me this whole time. I don't know, but this happened for about 2 hours, and she finally transferred me to a supervisor at that point. And again, I did the same process to the supervisor. The supervisor kind of fell into the same trap, but after 20 minutes, they were just like, oh, can't do this anymore. So they promised they would take one of the bug reports and investigate it. They even gave me a ticket number and an escalation ID and like some weird, I don't know, developer ID, which was probably made up. I don't know, but it's probably fake. But I guess it doesn't really matter. I managed to waste their time. And I reasoned this because I never really got any confirmation back about what they had done to solve the issue, this random issue that they supposedly picked. And yeah, so I left my computer on. I went home to waste just a little more time, and then sometime after that they just closed it automatically. If a company is going to waste our time, I'm going to waste your time. I can't sit here and troubleshoot your software for 4 hours on something that should just be working correctly. And that, folks, is how you waste a company's time. All right, now that's not something I would normally do, only in extreme situations, or to hackers or spammers and stuff like that. Yeah, Adobe. I don't want to get into Adobe too much, but I think because of their shoddy customer service, that they will eventually get replaced by another company. They tend to care only about their subscriptions and share prices. And it's funny because Adobe, back in the late 90s, replaced Quark Express, because Quark Express back then was actually doing the same customer support shenanigans that Adobe's doing now. And the customers eventually got so fed up with the way they were treating their customers that they jumped ship. And when Adobe came along, everyone jumped ship to Adobe software, and they're like, oh, this is so much better than what we're used to using. Basically, people were jumping ship faster than rats would be jumping off a sinking barge. Anyhow, there is so much more that I could talk about, but this is going to wrap up this episode of Media Channels. And as always, I would like to thank you for watching or listening. You can leave questions or comments for me below. To view or listen to more of these podcasts, like our Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channel by using the watermark in the bottom right corner, or follow me on Twitter. You can also listen to these episodes on popular podcasting platforms such as Libsyn, iTunes, and Stitcher. For a full list of podcasting platforms, please see the description or visit our website at multimedia.ca/media-channels. And I appreciate your support, and I truly value you as a customer. Please wait on hold while I look that up for you.